All right, Genesis 42, let's call this one conditional. Why? Because it has become popular and really cliche to teach that God's love is unconditional. However, if you actually test that and just go look it up, I'm not sure there's any English translation of the Bible in which you are actually going to see God's love described as unconditional. And so with that, we are looking at a chapter where Joseph is looking to be reconciled with his brothers. And as much as he loves them, and we're going to see later is willing to be reconciled with them, he is going to test them to find out whether or not they are actually trustworthy men now, or whether they are men who are still given to dishonesty. And that's where we find him in chapter 42, around verse 14, where they have come to Egypt seeking refuge from the famine. They do not recognize Joseph, but he recognizes them, and he is putting them to the test where it says, "But Joseph said to them, 'It is as I said to you, you are spies. By this you shall be tested. By the life of Pharaoh you shall not go from this place unless your youngest brother comes here. Send one of you and let him bring your brother while you remain confined, that your words may be tested, whether there is truth in you, or else by the life of Pharaoh you are surely spies.' And he put them all together in custody for 3 days. On the third day, Joseph said to them, 'Do this and you will live, for I fear God. If you are honest men, let one of your brothers remain confined here where you are in custody, and let the rest go and carry grain for the famine of your households, and bring your youngest brother to me, so your words will be verified, and you shall not die.'" 3 times it's talking about them either being personally tested or having their words verified. Why? Because he grew up with them and he knew he knew that they were given to dishonesty. And so now, being a man who is responsible for the entire kingdom, he needs to know whether or not these boys are people he can actually trust. Why? Look at it like this. If you are the CEO of a company and you got kids you love, you as the CEO are responsible not only for your personal legacy, but for the livelihoods of everybody who is employed in your company. You might love your kids very much, but if you have one who is irresponsible and incapable of carrying forward the legacy that you care about, and if you care about the employees, making sure that they have a reliable place to work, then the fact that you love them is not going to overshadow the fact that you need to test and find out whether they are capable of handling the responsibility of replacing you as CEO. That is what Joseph is doing right now. He is in a position of responsibility over an entire nation, and he needs to know whether or not his brothers are now men of integrity. I keep saying that word over and over again, but character matters not only to men handling great responsibility, but to God, who is preparing us all to be people who are capable of dealing with great responsibilities. How do we know? Am I just making it up? No. Jesus himself is literally going to say in Luke 16 what he's getting us ready for, what God is getting us ready for during our time here. When he is talking about a parable called the parable of the dishonest manager in Luke 16, he's going to sum it up in verse 10 when he says, "One who is faithful in very little is also faithful in much. And one who is dishonest in a very little is also dishonest in much. If then you have not been faithful in unrighteous wealth, who will entrust you to true riches? And if you have not been faithful in what is another's, who will give you that which is your own?" He is not preparing us, as we sometimes say here, to simply go to heaven and eat grapes and be fanned like you see in those old school Egyptian movies about the rich pharaohs. No, he's preparing you to be responsible for things beyond your understanding. The things here now, no matter how high you rise, he describes as small things in comparison to the responsibility he is planning to give you. And so looking at it from that perspective, it's easy to understand how there are parts of what he's telling us that are components of our time here that are completely conditional. When he says he is willing to forgive you, it is literally on the condition that you forgive. Jesus says that at the end of the Sermon on the Mount. When he says he will give you mercy, it is on the condition that you show mercy. James says that in his epistle. When he says one day God will exalt you, it is on the condition that you humble yourself now. James says that, and Peter reminds us as well. And ultimately, Jesus himself says, look, a condition of failing to remain in his teachings is that he will cut you off from the fellowship of those who he has elected for responsibilities beyond our current understanding. And so when we are looking at the testing that Joseph put his brothers through, it is important that we likewise test things like unconditional love and whether that has anything to do with what God is actually preparing us to be responsible for.